Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under, and a very happy episode that we can finally come to you after a victory. So with me to discuss the thrilling result is Brad. How are you, Brad?
Good, thanks, mate. Hello, everyone.
And I've also got Dan. How are you, Dan?
I'm in much higher spirits than I have been the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting actually thinking back to, we sort of sensed there was a chance against Middlesbrough. I think we were tipping 1-0 or something scrappy like that. So it's great to get over the line, no matter what the manner of the victory. I mean, I think it was a bit of a scrappy second half. But Brad, I'll start with you to discuss this one. We had the good news before the game that Malik Wilkes had signed permanently for the club, and no better way to celebrate that than with the winning goal in stoppage time.
Yeah, look, and I mean, we're not used to people actually wanting to join us or stay on with us, so it was a refreshing way to lead up to a game. But I mean, look, probably the best thing that I can say from the Middlesbrough game, and I must admit I didn't get to watch all of it, but I got to watch a good 75% of it, was there was times there where we just got battered, but we hung on. And that's something we haven't done, well, in long stretches in games for a long time. We've always conceded sloppy goals, and not just one. But to be able to hang on and then pinch something like that was about time.
Yeah, and I mean, Dan, Brad makes a good point. I remember I switched on the game, it would have been about the second or third minute, whenever that penalty was given for them. And they had a lot of chances after that, but sort of as Brad's saying, we managed to hold on and didn't concede again. So despite the fact it was a pretty scrappy second half, I guess positives to be taken.
Yeah, I think there obviously were positives, as you have both mentioned. It was pretty dour football to watch. It wasn't particularly attractive from us. And I don't think Middlesbrough were great either. They certainly created more, I guess, chances, but it was pretty scrappy all around. They got that early penalty, and then it wasn't long. It was maybe 10 minutes after that we equalised.
Fantastic free kick
with a great free kick. And it's just unfortunate that he's now injured and out for the and gone for the season. I think there's talk. McCann's trying to get him for next year again, but we'll see.
Yeah, it'd be great if we stay up and we're able to get him again. But yeah, I don't think there'll be many players who can claim to have been ruled out for the season with an injury twice in the same season. But it's not been much luck for poor old Herbie Kane with that. Yeah, so I mean, obviously it was great to go into halftime level, but sort of as you've both said, with the chances they were creating, I think especially down. I mean, it was sort of down Elder's side, to be honest, which is a little surprising when Pennington's probably the weaker of the two fullbacks. But yeah, able to withstand their goals. And then it came to that 91st minute, and I was sort of drifting off to sleep watching that second half, but that winner certainly woke me up. And yeah, great to just hold on for those 3 points. And Brad, what did you make? I don't know if you would have seen the comments from Neil Warnock after the game, where he basically said, no disrespect to Hull, but we shouldn't be losing to a club like that. Always nice to get him a bit annoyed, isn't it?
Look, he's a stroppy bugger, isn't he? But look, in the end, I mean, I suppose if you look at everything on paper, yeah, sure. We've had our own issues and all those sorts of things off the field, and we still forget that this is a new manager, relatively new manager to us. Lost his best players in the summer. Has had no reinvestment. You'd be pretty peed off if you were a rival manager that you do lose to us, because you should be looking at us as 3 points.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that they've got their own issues, and they are where they are for a reason too. So I wouldn't be throwing too much mud around until maybe you can get your team to stay up.
Absolutely. And then I guess the other interesting element I sort of touched on with Elder going off injured meant that Lopez slotted in at left back. And Dan, what did you make of his work there? And obviously he lined up there again in the next game against West Brom, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But just in terms of our personnel, looking a little bit thin down back now.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess that was. I guess. I mean, it worked. We didn't concede again. We got through that game. I honestly didn't think that he would play Lopez there again in the following game. But yeah, I don't know what else there is really to say about it apart from we lucked out and it worked, and I guess they obviously didn't pay enough attention or attack, because I reckon if they put a lot of traffic and some extra bodies down that side, then Lopez probably wouldn't have coped. But I don't know, maybe they were just getting frustrated with how things were going and weren't thinking clear enough or something. But
yeah, I mean, and look, it's a bit interesting because I know there was a few suggestions that we should have thrown on, I guess either Tafazoli or maybe McLaughlin or someone like that. But you look at Pennington down the right, and maybe you'd want someone a little bit more mobile than typically a centre back. And I mean, I guess Lopez has played right back or right wing back for us earlier in the season. It's certainly going to be interesting to see. I mean, hopefully, fingers crossed, Elder's back for the Bristol City game tomorrow morning. But whether we look at pushing Lopez over to the other side and replacing Pennington, and we'll talk about that West Brom game in a second, where he didn't put in a great display. But just from both of you, I guess I'll start with you, Brad. In terms of what this victory means for us, do you think, I guess also in context of Wigan having that points penalty, which realistically puts us 4 points or 3 points clear of the drop zone now, I think, where do you see this placing us? Do we still need another 4 or 5 points? Is this sort of the impetus that can kind of get us going?
Yeah, and I think, look, I mean, let's face it, it's 3 points. It was massive in the scheme of things, because it's been a long time between drinks for 3 points. I still think we're going to need more than we actually think we do. I always say we're not safe until it's all said and done. I'm still a little bit scared for what may or may not be coming our way, and whether that's the Wigan situation or not, who knows. But I still think probably the only thing that we should have some faith in is we beat a team around us, and that's something we haven't been doing in the past. We've won the games we shouldn't, and always drop points against the teams we should be trying to knock off all the time. So I just like the idea now that actually gave us hope. I think most of us thought before Middlesbrough that if we don't get 3 points, we're done. And if anything, it was probably the fact that rather than giving Middlesbrough 3 points against us, that 3 points and obviously leapfrogging them now means it's game on for us. Yeah,
definitely. Dan, what do you make of the situation? Do you sort of, I mean, I guess it's interesting. I guess Barnsley are on 42 points, so they are 3 points behind us, essentially 4 points. If you want to say that they're essentially in 22nd place, if we're assuming we can drop down into that 24th spot, how do you see the table looking for us now?
Look, I think the game against Borough could well turn out to be the pivotal point in this second little section of the season. I think the game against Birmingham, that 3-3, where we let them back in twice, had the potential to be to be catastrophic and to continue that. And I think if we had not got the points, if we'd not actually got up and got that late winner against them, I don't think that we ended up with a really strong performance against West Brom, and I don't think that would have been the case if we had dropped those points again. Even though, realistically, on how the game played out against Borough, it probably would have been, we're probably talking about a point gained more than points lost. But I think in the context, it's going to end up as a very important 3 points.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be pretty typical City that, we'll be fighting against relegation. We'll go to a Sunderland or a Burnley or whoever, and we end up being the side that drops the points and the other side gets up. So very refreshing against Borough to be the ones on the right side of that result. And Dan, as you touched on there, we'll talk about that West Brom game now. And it was a game that really could have gone one of two ways. And as you say, probably dependent on how we went against Borough. But to come away from that game, we were never really expecting to get much out of it, but to show the attacking intent that we did, to score the 2 goals, probably shows that the boys are really starting to get a bit of confidence now, and it gives us a lot to take into these next few games against Bristol City and Millwall. I'll start with you, Dan, on this one. Obviously, it was 1-0 to West Brom, then 1-1, then 2-1 to West Brom, then 2-2. So there was 2 times in that game where we pegged them back and we looked as if we could go on and get something out of it. I mean, Wilkes had that great run where he weaved between a few players in the box and then his shot went wide. But obviously, just a really promising display from the boys.
Yeah, it was. It was. I think I was pleasantly surprised by how well we played, and how quickly we went at them, and how much we were causing them problems. So it was really nice to see. I think an honourable mention, because yet again we've slagged off Honeyman in the last couple of weeks, and he actually came out and against West Brom was. His set piece delivery was outstanding. He was everywhere and tackling and doing all the things that we sort of maligned him for previously. So he actually came out and had a really good game. He was actually really impressive for me. I think that moment you referenced with Wilkes getting in on goal and skying it. I think between that and I think it was a Terrell. Had a really strong opportunity as well. Between those two misses, I think they cost us a point. I think if we'd have got those goals, I think it would have changed the complexion of the game because we were building all that momentum at that point. If we'd have scored those goals, we take the ascendancy. I don't know if we'd have then been actually properly carried on, but I think then West Brom got the third, which was the Grosicki goal. Which Pennington was just well out of position, and you cannot afford. I know he didn't have a great day at the office, but I think part of that is, he was up against Grosicki. We know how dangerous he can be, so he did not have an easy task. But I think particularly on that goal, he didn't do himself any favours.
And then Brad Wilkes with, I think it's now 6 goals in 11 games for us or something like that. Sort of touched on it with the Borough game as well. That clearly, I think, and I sort of said it when the news came through that he'd signed permanently. It must be such a weight off his shoulders as a young guy. He's only 21 to actually have his permanent future resolved and not just be here on loan. Not thinking he's potentially going back to Barnsley where he's not playing games. He's here permanently for at least 2 years. He must be, I'd assume he must be at least enjoying his time at the club if he's come in here on a permanent deal. And he's loving his football. 2 goals in 2 games since signing permanently for us.
Yeah, and look, I mean, that's what we were sort of saying at the start there too. He's obviously really wants to join us. We're not the most desirable club across all areas, but I think probably the thing that maybe showed some, sometimes you just need a little spark with something. And getting back to Dan's point about how big the 3 points were at Middlesbrough, we actually looked at times, and it's obviously when you're celebrating a goal, you look better, but we actually look more like a unit. The guys really want to play, and maybe this big gap in the season's actually done us well because we were on a hiding to nothing. Now maybe the players are realising we're in it a bit together, whereas other clubs might have had naturally that unity anyway. But the fact that we're sort of talking about Wilkes and losing very admirably to West Brom is a huge turnaround from 2 weeks ago. And the fact that I think the players genuinely think, all right, we play together. We go to, effectively the league leaders or potential champions and are disappointed to lose 4-2 and actually think that if we didn't make a couple of mistakes, we could have beat them is a massive turnaround. And I didn't get to hear it, but I did read that their manager had a few, I won't say he was glowing about us, but he was actually talking about the pressure they felt they were under. And that's something we haven't had for ages. We've been a walkover at times this year, and not just times, probably majority of the time. And to actually think, hang on a minute, we're against the league leaders or thereabouts, we can actually have a sniff here and try and I thought openly attack them was brilliant to see.
Yeah, and I think it was Jake Livermore who spoke to Phil Buckingham after the game and said that he didn't think we'd be in any trouble. And I mean, look, I think sometimes it's easy to say that when if you're just seeing us in this one-off performance. Yes, we looked really good in that. You can't imagine how we're down in the position that we're in, but we are for whatever reason. So there's clearly other issues that we need to kind of get together. But as you say, we're starting to look a lot more like a unit. We're starting to enjoy our football. Players seeming to be gelling in the formation. One player who's not necessarily been at his best in the last couple of games, Brad, was Pennington at right back, and it still boggles my mind when we think of the fact that we let Lehigh leave the club when he was the only recognised right back, or the only senior right back in the club. And I sort of touched on it before, talking about Lopez potentially playing there, but what do you see as the solution to this issue that we have where, especially when Elder goes down injured, we don't really have any fit fullbacks?
Yeah, I think it's a worry. I mean, we all said that we were obviously worried with some of the departures that we had, but I think coverage is everything, and knowing where, at times anyway, I think, especially against West Brom, there was times there where maybe Pennington's, maybe it's a lack of comfort, whatever it is, he's not quite there. And so what that does is it's keeping the centre backs a lot more vulnerable. And I mean, I know they made their own mistakes. Certainly, Geordie made a shocking error leading into that first
goal. Yeah,
it was a shocker. But I don't know. I mean, you look how open we looked at times. It's sort of like our back two were on their own. There's a problem there. I don't know what it's going to take to fix it, but probably the only good thing I would say is that if that is our problem, is who should be playing at fullbacks, then that's not a bad problem, because I think in the past we've had that real issue through our spine.
Yep.
No one up front holding the ball, no one really marshalling the troops through the middle and obviously down back. So I don't think it's a huge problem, and I'm not certainly trying to discount the value of fullbacks, but I'd be a lot more worried in the run-in if we weren't seeing... Well, I'd be more worried if I see Geordie make another mistake like that in a crucial game. But look, I don't have the answer. I don't really know. Technically, there is no cover.
Yeah. I think McKenzie could be playing there, but apart from that game against Chelsea, I don't know if he's necessarily stood out a whole heap this season. Interestingly, reports overnight were that we've supposedly signed a deal with Thibaut Villon, who is a free agent, having left the second division in France, was part of a World Cup winning under-20s team with Paul Pogba, so I think they kind of, look for any sort of glimmers of optimism about his ability. He's a right back, he's an attacking player, so look, at least it's a positive that the club's identifying that we obviously have needs to fill in the squad. Wouldn't be able to play until next season, but at least there's something there. Dan, in terms of positives as well from the performances from the players, another great performance from Magennis up top, and then as we sort of said, Honeyman's come into the side and looked really good in midfield as well. So we're starting to get a few different options in our squad, and when we talked about during the lockdown, we talked about the ratings of the players for the season so far. We weren't as glowing for some of these players, but they're really putting their hands up in this second half of the season.
Yeah, I think we've spoken several times at least throughout this season about who should be our first choice striker, and we, I think both of us often leaned towards Tom Eaves as the go-to guy, but whatever has happened, Magennis has come out and he has staked his claim and then some, because he has basically, since we've resumed, has been far and away the better option up front. He's creating more. He got a goal, he's doing a lot of good stuff. So I think there's perhaps it's just a lot of players who are maybe they're just getting their opportunity, a real opportunity now, or this is, I don't know, with the season coming to an end, and perhaps there's guys on shorter contracts or whatever, and they're doing their bit to try and for themselves, or maybe they are altruistically. It's just the club's in a poor position, and they're just trying to put their hand up and carry us through. So whichever case, I'm happy with the result anyway, because as you said, as I said, some of these guys that at times we have been fairly disappointed with their performances for the club are really playing with their heart on their sleeve at the minute, and some really good performances are coming from that.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got 2 games to look forward to in the next 7 days, to try and get a few more positive results. And we sort of touched on it a few weeks ago with the Bristol City game in particular being quite an interesting one, where they, especially now that they've lost to Cardiff, they really can't really make the playoffs. They can't be relegated. They've sacked their manager. I understand it because of the poor run of results, but whether it's to bring in a new manager to give them a bit of a run up to next season, I guess might be the logic. But I can't imagine it's going to make too much of a difference to where they finish off this season. Few names that have been linked. We've got, Tony Pulis and Chris Hughton as well. I think Hughton's actually put his hand up, or at least there's been media reports to suggest that. It's probably, unless he gets appointed as we go to air, I don't think he'll be in the dugout for the game tomorrow or overnight, because I think we're playing at 2 a.m. tomorrow morning, which might be a bit of a challenge for me to get up for, but we'll see how we go. Brad, what do you make of Bristol City as an opponent, especially one who've just sacked their manager, and what sort of response that might lead to from the players?
Yeah, well, that's my worry. I always like if we play them before they sack the manager, or we're part of the cause for it. But
we went on a run back in, I don't know, it would have been about 10 years ago now, where I could have sworn we got managers sacked almost every other week. Back in
no doubt. There's
losing
still
the whole city.
Yeah, exactly. And we know as well what it's like to have a caretaker manager at times pull a team together. You only have to look at I can't believe I've forgotten his name.
Phelan.
Yes, thanks, mate. Geez, I'm embarrassed. That first game against Leicester, it's still one of my favourite games because no one gave us a chance. The players probably thought, well, who cares? We're just going to have a crack. And look what happened. So I would have been happy if Johnson got the sack after our game. But I still think probably the thing that holds us in good stead is we're a team that probably think, I hope anyway, that we actually don't belong. Although the data says we should, we don't feel like, after West Brom anyway, that we should be in the bottom 3 or 4 teams.
Yeah.
Whereas, Bristol are a bit scorned. I still think Bristol will be thinking they can make playoffs. We know that it's near on done, but until it's done, they should be still thinking about how far to go. And who knows what players are coming up for contract, out of contract, new manager, too many variables that are positive for them. But I don't mind the fact that hopefully they've got a caretaker this week who's actually going to try and change things up, and obviously that throws them out a bit, and it's good for us.
Yeah, definitely. Dan, how do you see it with the new manager bounce potentially for Bristol City? And I guess as a broader question as well, how do you see us lining up? Do you see essentially trying to keep the same sort of players in that were good at West Brom, or obviously, I mean, Samuelson up forward wasn't too effective against West Brom. We might see a little bit of rotation.
Yeah, certainly an interesting one. You only have to look at Borough, a fortnight ago. Warnock came in, they won, then obviously we took them on the second game. But so whether Bristol has the same success with their changing the guard, but I think I read that whoever's in charge at the minute, basically, because I think it was right after the game that Johnson got the sack, and he basically told all the players they got the weekend off. They got told, right, go home, spend time with your family, process this. So I don't know. They might be fresh, but it may count against them. It was just an interesting thing that I read, and I thought, okay. I guess obviously no one was really, that maybe it was sort of a bit left field. No one was probably really expecting it, but I think something about it's been a few years where they've failed to make the playoffs, and that was really what it was. But such a strange, it's a strange time to pull the pin, considering like where they are, if they're mathematically alive but realistically not. But I don't know. I think in terms of changes, probably it's. I think Samuelson was particularly disappointing for me. I thought he would have shown a lot more given the chance. I thought he would have just offered something, because in some of the cameos he's had previously, he's looked quite dangerous, but he really didn't offer a lot. Again, Keane Lewis-Potter, got plenty of game time, and I thought showed, played quite well. So perhaps we can finally get the start that he's been crying out for on that left side. But if not, it's probably James Scott would he's probably going to maybe go back to James Scott to start again. Elder, if he's fit, has to come back in.
Yep.
What you do with Leo, as you proposed, whether he goes over to right back and give Peno a break, or whether I'll probably just prefer him to go into the midfield. I think that's really realistically his strongest position, and we look stronger when he's in the middle. That'd probably be my only that'd be my only suggestions for personnel changes.
And I actually forgot, I was just having a look, that John Terry was another name linked with the job, so that would be a very interesting one. But look, the talk about Bristol City not really, for a few years of having had that promise but not being able to go on with it, always just reminds me of the fact that, of course, playing them back in that 08 playoff final, there but for the grace of God goes us sort of thing, where if fortunes were reversed, we could be that Bristol City side that have just sort of stuck around in the championship for 5-10 years and not really achieved too much. So always an interesting fixture against them. Brad, do you see, obviously like a potential change to one of our wingers, Elder coming back in at left back, is there any other sort of changes that you'd like to see to the side?
No, look, I don't think you want to change too much. It would be more just about, the fitness of the players getting through the short turnaround times, that sort of stuff. Obviously, that's the whole problem with this division, is managing that personnel, and we know that we haven't had abundance of that personnel together. But look, I think at the moment you make as minimal changes as you need to, on the basis that this is still a winnable game, and we want to put the best possible team together this week, because there's no point just planning for next week.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say, so this is a winnable game we need to focus on, and sort of bringing in this coming game with Millwall as well. I wanted to sort of ask you which you see as the more important game to focus on, or are they both, I guess, equally important? I mean, Millwall up in 10th, so they're arguably a little bit more in with a shout for the playoff places. They're only 5 points off the playoff places with the 5 games still to play. They're going to play tomorrow morning as well as us. So do you see, because we sort of had this discussion last week about the Borough and West Brom games, where quite clearly the Borough game was more important, so if there was going to be any squad rotation, it would come against West Brom. These two games, it's a lot more tricky because they're pretty much of a muchness. So how would you want to see any sort of prioritization of the games, or is it just here's Terrell, Honeyman and Stewart, they'll get central midfield in one game, and Lopez and whoever, Batty and someone else will get the minutes in the other game, and it's just a roll of the dice.
Yeah, I think you've just got to play the next one.
Yeah.
And that is that, something could happen on the training ground or something where you've allowed a guy to rest this week. And I still remember going back to when we were in a promotion type phase a few years back. We still, even those midweek games, we'd make a couple of minor changes, but we would still have the same core, and it would just be a matter of managing their time depending on the result. I think we've got to basically say, look, at the moment, there's no Millwall game. It's just all Bristol.
Yeah.
We take them on, and some of the cards will fall certain ways for the Millwall game anyway.
Yeah, definitely. But Dan, how do you see that Millwall game coming up? Do you sort of... It's all just focused on Bristol City. So we've got them so it's actually 3 a.m. tomorrow morning, so that's an even more inconvenient time. 3 a.m.'s got to be just about the worst possible time for a football match, because it's, a bit too late to stay up for and a bit too early to get up for. But we've got Bristol City tomorrow morning at 3 a.m. and then Millwall midnight on Sunday, so it's actually quite a short turnaround for the boys.
Yeah, I thought I was having a look and I noticed that Borough plays Millwall after us. Oh, sorry, no, plays Millwall tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I was going, that interesting. Like, I think you look at that and you go, contextually, then, like, we need to win the Bristol game because, and hope that Millwall gets the job done against Borough. That opens up that gap a bit more. And it's just having a look at the fixtures. We just reverse. So we play Bristol then Millwall, and they play Millwall then Bristol.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Super quick.
yeah, just an interesting sort of things. But I think the old football adage, you can only take it one game at a time. So you have to focus on Bristol because it's the next one in line. If we pick up the points, hopefully, as happened this morning, a few results, went our way. Hopefully, Millwall gets the points against Borough tomorrow. We open up that gap. Then we look at Millwall, and hopefully we can replicate that, and we can get up over Millwall. Borough falls to Bristol. All of a sudden the state of play is a whole new game. But that's obviously that's a best case scenario. But
Yeah.
I think you just have to look at Bristol first because it's the next game in line, and don't worry, and you can't worry about what realistically what is happening elsewhere. It's just a side effect that we get to deal with when we get a chance.
Yeah, definitely. And I've also just noticed we're playing Wigan at 3 a.m. next Wednesday, so might have to organise for the podcast to be a little bit earlier next week to account for that. But we'll see how we go. So just before I let you guys go, start with you, Brad. Do you have score predictions or just a result prediction for these two games?
I think we will beat Bristol. I think it'll be 2-0, 2-1, something like that. But I think against Millwall we'll get a point. But still, 4 points from the two is pretty damn good.
4 points from the two. Would you almost start to think about safety then?
Look, I would, but I know what those last couple of games are going to look like. I know that we've got dangerous Luton somewhere in there, and I hate playing the bottom team towards the end of a season. And I think we've got there's someone in the top four, I think.
So we've got Wigan, then Luton, then we finish off with Cardiff.
Yeah. So look, I still don't know if we really know we're going to be safe, depending on what really Middlesbrough do.
Yeah. Dan, what are your predictions for these two?
Well, coincidentally, they're almost identical to Brad's. I was thinking about a 2-1 victory over Bristol is probably. I would really love a clean sheet, but it just seems that every time we look like we might be capable of it, we just give away a goal somehow. Normally off a bloody set piece or something, but. I think 2-1 over Bristol, and then probably like a scored 1-1 or something against Millwall. But it'd be very interesting to see how the teams around us continue to go, because so far I think we've been fairly fortunate with the results for the teams around us. So if we happen to break away a little bit from that, we could actually almost be safe after these two games. Yeah,
I mean, I think Barnsley and Luton had a draw this morning, which helps us, and then Middlesbrough and Stoke and Charlton have all been losing a couple of games lately, so that all sort of helps us if we can continue to pick up points. I mean, as you say, talking about clean sheets, I think the stat is that we've conceded the second most goals in the division, but we've scored like the fifth most or the sixth most of any team in the division. So we're involved in a lot of high-scoring games, which is probably a pretty common theme for us over the last few seasons. At least I remember that second half of the season, our first season of the Championship with Adkins, where it seemed like we were having 5-5 draws with Bristol City. Appropriate for our opponents now, but we have had some pretty crazy matches lately. And look, I'd love to take a 1-0 win against Bristol City just to get that clean sheet, to give the defence a bit of confidence, get the 3 points. Millwall, I think, is going to be really tough. I remember, must have been last season, where we got smashed there 3-0 or something like that. But so it's a tough game. So I guess we'll see how we go in that one. Look, if we can get 4 points out of the next two games, I think that would put us very close to safety, which would be very good, and not something I was expecting a week ago. I think that those two performances against Borough and West Brom have certainly managed to turn things around. But thank you for joining me, Dan.
No worries.
And thanks as well, Brad.
Cheers, mate.
No problem. And thanks everyone for listening in. We'll be back next week, probably a little bit earlier next week, so that we can preview that Wigan game. And until then, come on, City.
You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter @HullCityAFCOz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
going higher and higher. There's no turning back 'cause you're amber and black till you die.